Hello and welcome to The Defender, Wisconsin's environmental podcast. I'm Amy Barrilleaux. The Defender is powered by Clean Wisconsin, your environmental voice since 1970. It's the time of year in Wisconsin when we are full of anticipation. It's starting to get a little bit warmer. The landscape is beginning to turn from brown to green. And before you know it, we'll all be planting gardens and heading to the farmer's market. And Wisconsin's food scene will be bursting with local ingredients. Wisconsin was one of the first places where the farm-to-table movement really took root, but now that movement is changing, becoming more urgent in the face of the flooding, droughts, changing weather patterns that are taking a toll on our food systems. In this episode, I welcome Madison's 2025 Chef of the Year, Evan Danells, to talk about why these days chefs are adding protecting the planet to the menu. That's right now on The Defender. We are in the volatile, unpredictable roller coaster of a time known as spring in Wisconsin, right before growing season and local food season really starts to blossom. And it's during this time that Clean Wisconsin holds its annual Epicurean Evening event, this year on April 30th at Monona Terrace, a 5-course meal and craft cocktail tasting that highlights the connection between a clean, safe environment and delicious, healthy food. And that important connection is becoming more urgent as we face everything from pesticide and chemical fertilizer overuse to soil loss to contaminated water and, of course, climate change. Joining me to talk about how food and cooking can make a difference for our planet is Cadre chef and owner Evan Danells. Evan, thank you so much for being here. I know chefs are always really busy, so I appreciate it.
We're known for that. It's my absolute pleasure. I think one of the constants inside of chefs is the answer is never no to things like this. So we're always really happy to help.
Well, I want to start, not talking about necessarily food and the connection to the environment, but first food and the connection to you and your life. Like, when did you start thinking, wow, I really enjoy food and cooking, or this could be a passion? Did it start, I guess, kind of early?
Yes. It was an interesting thing that I didn't, I think, fully realize until I got a little bit older. I was not allowed in the kitchen at home. That was my mom's happy place, and therefore I was not allowed. I stumbled into restaurant work at 14. A buddy of mine that was a couple years older worked at a restaurant and said, like, "Oh, hey, we had a dishwasher not show up. Can you come help?" And I jumped in, and something about sort of the perfect blend of chaos and excitement that I saw in that first restaurant kitchen was what initially attracted it to me. I worked through high school and college in restaurants, and then got done and realized that I liked working in restaurants a whole lot more than I liked what the post-collegiate world would look like for me. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I realized that the punctuation to every single memory that I have that's good involves food. Every single one. I can't tell you what someone was wearing the day that something great happened in my life, but I could probably tell you what we ate.
So you could, working in a restaurant, yeah, I think it's a certain kind of energetic vibe, and a lot of people are drawn to that, but you could have been drawn to, managing the house or some other aspect of restaurant. What about the actually cooking of food and bringing together menus and that kind of thing really drew you in?
Well, I think to me, it's just always been about the food. It's I enjoy the sense of community and connection that comes along with restaurants, and as I've gotten older, I've learned to enjoy that even more and more. But I think when I was young, the initial draw, when you're younger, the universe tends to revolve around you ever so slightly more. And for me, it was just like, oh, I love food, I love this, I love that. Like, I want to explore more and more and more. And then I think over the years of doing this, I added a sense of purpose by realizing like what community hubs restaurants are, how they connect people, how they can be used as a platform to push, your particular agenda related to food and sustainability and all those other things. because I think at the root of it, being a chef and a restaurateur is about nourishing people, and you don't want to do harm in the act of nourishing people. And so sustainability is a very like obvious fit for that. Like I don't want to be destroying the earth while I'm also feeding people and adding to their lives. I want to make sure that there's a purity to everything that I do, that it's all part of something larger. And that's why I came to Madison specifically, was because I'd finished school in Portland, Oregon, and I'd grown up in Kansas, where there was not a lot of organic farming or anything. I don't think there was much of any going on when I was in the 90s. And I got introduced to it on the West Coast, and then wanted to follow that back to the Midwest that I love. And Madison, with the largest producer-driven farmers market in the world, and the small organic farming infrastructure that we've had for 50 years now, was the original appeal that brought me back here.
Right.
I do like to jokingly tell people sometimes that I don't know whether it was a coincidence that the best food that's grown with care and sustainability is also good for the earth. If it was destructive, would I have chased it? But it just so happens we don't need to even think about that, because it turns out the things that are best for the planet are also the best for us and the tastiest.
That's I think we don't always think about, though, as eaters. We go into a restaurant, this tastes good, I'm happy. Do you ever think of yourself as kind of that conduit between sustainable farming and all of the good that comes from that, and then people's plates, and kind of showing people, hey, producing food this way, in a way that is good for the planet and good for the food, produces something that is special, that maybe people don't realize?
Absolutely. I think, again, like, we're so blessed in Wisconsin. We're able to do it like almost no other place in the country can, and it's a great example of how it can work. I think when I first started working in restaurants, no one knew the name of any chef at any restaurant ever. You had the Frugal Gourmet and Julia Child, and Emeril Lagasse was just getting popular on TV, and the celebrity chef culture that has been built up by the Food Network over decades now didn't exist. And that was definitely not an appeal to me. I didn't want to become someone whose opinion mattered, but like it or not, when you travel far enough along the chef world, people start to ask you, why do you do what you do? Why do you feel the way you feel? And there's a sense of obligation that comes along with that. And I mean, we're all about connection, both with the culture that the food comes from, with the food itself, with the people that we're serving the food to. And so interacting with small local farms, keeping the money in your community, all those things just all line up in this perfect way that just gives me the feels. Every time I think about how blessed I am to be able to make a living in a way that I can support so much around me while still doing what I love.
So what are the things that Cadre does to, support not just local agriculture, but sustainable local agriculture? What is, because I don't know a ton about running a restaurant or designing dishes or anything like that, but what are the things that you kind of think about as you do that?
Well, I mean, number one will always be seasonality. Eating the things in the moment that they're available from Mother Earth is not only the best way to get food at its peak, but it's also the only way to get food that you can be assured has been produced and transported in a way that's good for the environment. The carbon footprint of grocery stores needing to have tomatoes and things like, and avocados and bananas all year round is staggering. And the funny thing about it is I have friends and family that live in California where everything's available all the time. And I don't feel like they have the same level of appreciation that you get from having to actually endure seasons and capitalize on eating those things in the moment that they're the best. And I think once you decide to make a conscious effort to do that, even if it's just for your own benefit, to just eat the things when they're best, the rest of the equation falls into place, and you start to understand the circle of life that goes into, all the fruits and vegetables and even the animals that come along with farming and community and restaurants. It's all super intertwined.
I'm sure you get this question a lot. How do you, in a place like Wisconsin, where January and February you feel kind of so deprived in those months, those frozen months. How do you make a menu that is still appealing using, because really it feels like nothing's at its peak in those winter months. How do you kind of approach that with creativity?
Well, you're absolutely right. First of all, nothing is at its peak at those points. It doesn't mean that they're only bad things. Um, a lot of farms here do a very, very good job of cellaring lots of roots, but I have a rule. It's a little bit of a joke, but like when the growing season starts, I stop consuming beets, and I will not touch them again until usually it's around the 1st of November, because I have had beets for 6 months. and baby beets are just a trick to get you to eat beets all year round. They're great. I'm joking. But keeping it exciting during those months is just a matter of planning. But fortunately for us nowadays, especially with climate change, there are a lot of farms out there working with geothermal in hoop houses to produce radishes, carrots, even cherry tomatoes and things like that can happen in the middle of winter. They come with a little bit more price, but it makes it that much more special when you get to have these little presents that happen during the slow season. I think right now, in the moment that we're talking about this, right at the end of March and beginning of April, is the absolute bleakest moment right before the growing season starts, where in a lot of the country it's already kind of spring, but here in Wisconsin, where this is still the tail end of winter.
Sure.
It might be t-shirt one day and winter coat the next. Nothing's coming out of the ground yet for the most part, but every year I get a surprise. Tommy Stoffer from Vitruvian came in to talk to me about the upcoming growing season. We try to plan plantings and business with a lot of the farms we work with. And he brought me the first radishes and turnips I've had this year. And they were fantastic. And they saw some trends and thought that it might be a little warmer a little bit earlier. And they popped them into the hoop houses early. And darn if I didn't have fresh produce before the 1st of April, which is almost unheard of. Usually the indicator for the beginning of the season is ramps, which I haven't gone out to look yet, but probably aren't quite ready to be pulled out of the ground yet.
Ramps is an exciting time. I will say that. I did want to ask you about this, before we get more into sustainability and things like that, about this menu item that you have, that's just basically a broth. And I can't remember what it's called, but it's
restoratif.
The restoratif. What gave you first, what is it, and what gave you the idea to have this sort of eternal broth going?
Oh, it's crazy. So the original general manager that worked here with me, Colton Shara, is the biggest book nerd I have ever known, and I love him to death. And he's the kind of guy that when you have a conversation with him, he would go home and read a book about whatever you were talking about to bring some more to the table the next time. And COVID was a terrible time for us. We opened just right before the big COVID shutdown. We had been open for 4 months when we had to shut down. And it forced us to spend a lot of time deciding what we wanted to be, what we didn't want to be, what we were willing to be, and what we weren't willing to be. And we spent a lot of time thinking about the things, the gestures that make a restaurant special. And the original restaurants, the root word in it is restore. Restaurants were for restoration, and they weren't originally places that people would come and specifically eat dinner. They were waypoints along the countryside where you would stop and hitch your wagon and have your horses groomed and maybe sleep for the night and maybe move on when you were traveling between one place and the other. But the custom at the time was to have a kettle of broth on the hearth to give people when they stopped in to rest on their slow journey by horse from here to there. And I always thought that's such a great gesture to have this warm broth to just kind of like get rid of the chill. Because I mean, let's face it, folks, we're in Wisconsin, we're in winter half the year here. And to just have this like nourishing, healthy thing to start your experience of being in a different space. And so, and then, there's vegetable scraps galore all over the place. When you butcher animals, there's bones to be had. And so, we thought it would be fun to have a perpetual broth. And so we have it started out originally as we had a kettle on all the time, and we would just be throwing things in there. As time went on, I decided I wanted a little bit more control over the flavor. So what we do now is as we sometimes order in bones too. Like we have a really nice relationship with the Reimer family farm. And they have a hard time getting rid of their excess bones. So we buy those too. And then as we produce scraps and bones as well, we set them aside and then we put them into the pot with whatever vegetable scraps work inside of a stock. Like, do not recommend things like radish greens. Tastes pretty terrible.
Okay.
We'll make the broth and then set some aside and marry it with the next one. And so we've had some measurable amount of the same broth carried over into the broth after it for, I think we started in 2021. So it would be 5 years now.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Don't people say, like, are they excited when they find this stuff out?
So the funny thing, I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it. It was 5 years as of yesterday. I think it's really neat. And I think people initially didn't have their head wrapped all the way around it, but it's taken on a life of its own. There are people who come in just for it. We have regulars who, when they or a family member is sick, will come buy it cold from us to heat up in a pot at home to give to other people. And I'm not even entirely certain. It's hard to quantify the expense of the thing, but it's not important. It's the cheapest thing on our menu. I wish everyone would get it. It's a great way to start your meal, and broth is it's the base of so many things, and it's just an amazing way to kind of settle into an experience.
I feel like it's kind of symbolic of your philosophy, or at least what I've heard so far of it. It's just this kind of like, this restaurant is a community space, right? Where you are working with local farmers and thinking about those local supply chains, and then thinking about how to bring that to a community like Madison.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's all about connection. It's all about connection. And I think that's why I'm here doing this with you here today, is because Clean Wisconsin is all about connection between the air and the water and the earth and all those other things that we need to make me able to do what I do.
Well, you transition. Yeah, perfect. Excellent transition. Yes, Clean Wisconsin, because we have this Epicurean evening, this celebration of the environment and food and health, kind of all in one moment. It's chefs like you that kind of underscore that. What is it? What are the things that you think about when you plan a menu or work at the restaurant that are really important in terms of producing good food? Like I'm guessing it's like soil quality and water quality and all those kinds of things that go into this whole idea.
God, I'm glad I don't have to think about those things. I don't think about those things at all personally on like a farm to farm basis. I'm not asking any farmers to give me a soil test. We establish relationships with people who have similar standards. I'm not always married to organic. I understand that there are rules involved, but sustainability is very important to me. And proximity, and so we make sure that we do businesses and even sustainable on a financial level. Like I try to do a whole lot of business with not that many farms, because I become a bigger part of their life by doing that, and they become a bigger part of ours, and we can all grow together. And so it's about finding people who understand in the same way that we accept the stewardship of the people that come into our restaurants. We want to work with people who accept stewardship of the land that they're raising the things on. And we're really fortunate. I came here, my first job, I came here to work at L'Etoile. And so I followed in the footsteps of giants. Odessa Piper was just already doing it in 1976. And then Tori picked up that mantle and ran with it as well. And to be honest with you, it has just never occurred to me that there's another way, because I couldn't imagine doing it. And I think people understand that, or our farmers market wouldn't be as successful as it is. I avoid it. I don't like crowds. But the popularity of it as an institution, I think, shows that people, maybe not consciously all the time, but at least subconsciously, understand that local food is better, or they wouldn't be coming out here to walk around the square to do it. They would just go to a grocery store.
That's true. And the walking around the square in a big crowd is basically, you got to be up for that. But it is a great Madison experience.
You've got to do it at some point. Not every week necessarily for me, but I mean, I'll go to the first one every year.
Get the ramps, and then what else is at the first farmers market? I guess asparagus.
Asparagus if you're lucky. Maybe wild asparagus. Probably not a lot of cultivated stuff. Actually, the first market is usually kind of sad from a produce perspective.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be this year. We've been a little unseasonably warm. I think you're going to see some radishes and turnips and a lot of farmers, a lot more in the 25 years I've been in Madison. The amount of farmers that use hay groves and hoop houses to grow has gone up quite a bit. And so we're able to jump the gun on seasons because they provide like a thermal buffer of 15, 30 degrees, so that they can get started germinating things earlier. And so they'll plant earlier, and it helps extend our seasons, because there are a lot of things that barely grow this far north that are like things people consider staples, like artichokes or a lot of kinds of peppers. Our tomato season is often artificially cut short because of weather as well. And those things are only possible to happen in a more, what would you say, like a more unpredictable climate that we found ourselves with 20 years later. And so a lot of people bring those things. So you go to the market, the first markets, and like I think the market as an institution doesn't necessarily have to start with produce, which is why I still go to the first one. You'll find some people, some flowers are already out, little stuff, pansies, things like that are annual that people already have started. Ramps, probably some radishes and turnips, a lot of things that come up in the spring that are from the year before are also available that people haven't seen in a while, like parsnips, sunchokes, things like that people can dig out later. Carrots. They get really sweet if you leave them in the ground all winter long.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And then you got to go get your hot spicy cheese bread and stop by Renaissance and get some pesto and go over to Savory Accents and get some hot sauce. Next thing you know, I'm all loaded up anyways.
This is why you shouldn't go every week, because you'll never stop buying all the things.
It's always just me. I'll just be like, oh, this is for me, and none of this is for the restaurant. I just got excited.
Yeah, I do get that. So I wanted to go back to Odessa Piper for a minute, because I remember reading an article about a current themed dinner that you partnered on probably almost 10 years ago now.
I want to say it was probably 6. It happened during COVID.
Oh, it was during COVID. Okay.
5 or 6 years ago. It was with the Savannah Institute, which is an amazing organization.
Yes, right. We actually, Clean Wisconsin, partners with the Savannah Institute on sort of the same kinds of things. And I think a lot of people maybe haven't heard of currants or don't know why they are important in terms of the environment. Do you feel like participating in things like this, or like the Epicurean Evening at Clean Wisconsin, is a way to kind of spotlight, hey, these are important ingredients, or these are important things that we need to be doing to kind of take care of our resources as best we can?
Oh, well, you're opening up a whole different scary can of philosophical worms. I think, as we're noticing with another thing that I'm sure Clean Wisconsin's all over, which is like people are trying to put in AI data centers and all these other things. As a species, we have a tendency to grow at the speed of innovation, not necessarily at the speed of being able to think about the consequences of innovating. And farming is no exception. There are a lot of amazing things that you don't get to see because they take too long to grow, didn't travel well, use up a lot more acreage. Like my absolute favorite vegetable, Romanesco. Oh man, it's everything good about broccoli and everything good about cauliflower smashed together. The reason that you see cauliflower instead of Romanesco at a grocery store is because you can get 10 times the yield of cauliflower in the same space as Romanesco. We did that as a society to farmland and through deforestation all over the state. Currants don't grow as fast as strawberries. So let's cut all these currants back because you got to go into the forest and you get stuck by thorns and it's too hard to do. So we'll just get those out of the way and we'll make room for strawberries. Oh, well, this kind of potato that's naturally grown in Wisconsin forever, we can't get as much out of the soil. So let's put russet potatoes in there instead. People did this out of necessity, not greed. Farming is a hard life. And I think in the advent post World War II of like the more nationalization of grocery chains and all those other things, we had a tendency to move on to commodity crops that traveled well, that stored well, that did all those other things. And we did it without thinking about what happens when Mother Nature isn't perfectly like this for us. And what I like about what the Savannah Institute's doing is they're trying to reestablish things that already knew how to grow here for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Because if you start with that as your base point, figuring out how to adjust it to climate change in the future is so much easier than trying to take something that wasn't supposed to be here in the first place and adapt it to the future.
I think, that's a really interesting point because all of those foods that 100 years ago people knew, like currants or, many different kinds of plants that were specifically Wisconsin, Midwest plants, have all been kind of, not all of them, but many of the times pushed aside for, potentially corn or soybeans or other things that are kind of commodity crops. Did you open a lot of eyes with that event where you had people come in and taste currants?
No, but but it was even better because what was neat about that event was it brought scholars to the table. So we had people visiting from universities. We had farmers that were really interested in permaculture. Like these were experts. I was the dumbest person in the room by far. And that was what was so neat about it. And what's so neat about Odessa working with the Savannah Institute and being able to bring the weight of not only her thought about all of these things, despite the fact that she only shares her time here for the last quite a while now, but also knowing that she can use the power that she got by starting all this to bring bigger, smarter, more capable minds together to help kind of push this thing forward. And so my little restaurant only has a limited amount of outreach, but when we manage to do an event that gets professors and growers and soil scientists and all these things in the same room, man, it was pretty cool. I hope we can do many more of those in the future.
So you're one of the chefs participating in Epicurean Evening, which is an annual event from Clean Wisconsin to kind of highlight that connection, all these things that we're talking about, really. How important is it for people to really, right now in this moment, make that connection between your health, your food, and your environment, and the just interwoven nature of all of that?
I hate to sound doom and gloom, but I think a lot more important than it's ever been. We are in southern Wisconsin, especially, we are positioned right on the cusp of two different climate zones. And I think a lot of the problems that we've been seeing with a lot of the commodity crops that we grow is we don't know which side of that climate zone we're on. And we've been getting erratic weather and temperatures and all those other things. And I think we've kind of universally acknowledged as a species that we've probably crossed that carbon place where we can fix this easily. So now we've moved on and realized that we need to learn to adapt to the future. And uh, we're once again, I mentioned data centers earlier. We're once again innovating faster than we can realize the consequences of. Um, I just noticed the other day that Charlie Barnes is fake running for governor.
Oh, I didn't know
Uh, specifically to oppose data centers, which I think is a really cool thing for him to do. We just don't understand the consequences. And I think we actually, in the data center case, we do understand the consequences. It's just that the money is pushing the legislation harder than we can fight back against at a grassroots level right now. We're building momentum and things like that. But we already have this added stress of global warming happening that's making things harder for a lot of people to do in terms of growing. And I don't think, I think people have lost a connection with just how much of the breadbasket of the country the Midwest is. Like, we collectively need to produce food or people will starve. And if we don't, we're already trying to figure out how to adjust to this global warming thing. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. But if we have people polluting the land and the air and the water while we're trying to do it, it's going to fail. And we have an obligation to, as science progresses and we understand that there are implications for reckless innovation, we need to collectively recognize that we have a responsibility to the future to try to leave the world maybe a little better than the direction it was headed in. And it starts with organizations like Clean Wisconsin. If there weren't organizations like you out there making people test and showing people data and pushing legislation and doing all those other things, nothing would happen at all, because essentially we live in a country where the only two reasons that legislation passes, at least in Wisconsin right now, is it's shoved into existence by money buying votes, or we shame people into doing the right thing. And I think, the more money we can raise for Clean Wisconsin, the less shaming we can do. And as a Midwesterner, we don't like shaming each other. So it's better to be proactive and do things like, I could be on a pulpit screaming about how I feel like we're destroying the earth, or I could be out there trying to give people a good time doing what I do best and raising money for an organization that I know is going to go out there and help with the stewardship of the land that I want to be a part of.
That is, I think, a great perspective, because one thing I get asked a lot is from people is, well, I feel overwhelmed and I feel scared and I don't know what I can do. And it's kind of paralyzing. If you look at all the things that are going on right now in Wisconsin and beyond, it can be a scary thing. So does it feel like you're taking your skills, which is food, connections to farmers, showing the community what tastes good and what sustainability is all about, to kind of make the difference that you can?
Absolutely. I think, I think we're, as a chef, I'm uniquely positioned to do things like this. We work in an overwhelming business. Something's leaking, something broke, someone called in sick, this delivery is not coming in, the email box is exploding, we're getting phone calls, somebody gave us a bad review on Yelp, somebody wants to talk to us about this or that. That is the structure of my life, is the world to a restaurateur is constantly trying to overwhelm you. And one trick that every chef learns is bite-sized pieces. You can be paralyzed with fear, or you can find something that you can do something about it, and realize that even if it's small, you're still a step better than when you were just flailing around, feeling your feelings about how overwhelmed you are. And that's the mentality that I bring into raising money for causes like this, is that I don't have the time or bandwidth to tackle this issue myself, but I believe in it, and I'll take the amount of time and energy that I have available, and I'll put it towards that, knowing that it's going to be used well. And there are a lot of organizations and nonprofits out there that don't do a great job of using it well. That's why, you've heard stories about Salvation Army and things like this, where the 80% of the money goes to executive salaries and things like that. And I do my research in the organizations that I support. I'm on the board of REAP. And I make sure that the organizations that I support are taking that money and doing meaningful work. And I think for the people who have the ability to give, that's the most important thing, is knowing that it's an empty gesture when you just light money on fire and throw it into the ether. But when you know that you're handing it to someone who's going to take that and do something good, you are doing good. We can't all do everything. I know it's human nature to feel that way, but sometimes the best thing to do is hand it off to the experts.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about all this, and for being one of the great chefs who's going to be turning out some wonderful food at Epicurean Evening. I really appreciate it, and I've really learned a lot, so thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to The Defender. For more information and tickets to Epicurean Evening before they sell out, check the link in our show notes or head to cleanwisconsin.org/events. And if you have something you want me to talk about or a comment on the show, send me an email, podcast@cleanwisconsin.org. I'm Amy Barrilleaux. Talk to you later.